Hey everybody. In the past few months, I've been watching and rewatching a bunch of anime from Kyoto Animation. Alongside K-On!, The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, Liz and the Bluebird, and Nichijou on my top 10 favourite anime list. I think Hyouka is one of the finest experiences the studio has to offer. Many of the best parts of the show can be found throughout their repertoire. However, I have a special connection to Hyouka because it was one of the first shows I watched. And after my first rewatch in a few years, at the end of last year, I realised that I've gained a whole new appreciation for the show. And it really kicked off my whole KyoAni rewatch binge. Disclaimer, I haven't read any of the light novels, so I might credit the wrong creator in terms of the things I praise or the few things that I criticise. Also, this video essay is quite messy, so I just tried to structure it a little bit with the cards. I wasn't very, smart about that. My apologies. Without any further ado, let's begin. Shuhei Okude, the art director of Hyouka, mentions that bleach bypass photos were key references. Bleach bypass is a film development technique that involves skipping a step in the development process to produce images with reduced saturation and added contrast. When comparing Hyouka's filmic hues and saturation to another KyoAni show, like Tamako Market, it's clear that Hyouka is more muted and has a smaller colour palette. This is for a good reason. Director Yasuhiro Takemoto describes the need for a subdued atmosphere, since the show is, at its quintessence, a work about Hotaro's mind. Okude also explains that the subdued tint devoid of flashiness is the world's colours as seen through Hotaro's eyes. This applies to the several rose-coloured scenes. In these scenes, the hues are dramatically shifted towards pink, as it represents Araki's perception of the rose-coloured life. There is one scene that has stood out to me that is coloured differently than every other. It occurs in the final scene during the parade. The scene, by contrast, doesn't have the exaggerated pink look. Rather, it's a modified version of Hyouka's usual look, with more saturation and less contrast. It's almost as if the bleach bypass characteristics were removed. The importance of colouring the scene differently from all the other rose-coloured scenes is because this is the real deal. This is the true rose-coloured life. Araki in the typical pink shots is romanticising the rose-coloured life. It's exaggerated due to him not knowing what that looks like. During the parade scene, however, Araki is living the rose-coloured life. There's a whole lot more visual storytelling in the world that the characters inhabit. My brother has pointed out to me that it's a staple of KyoAni shows to visit the characters' bedrooms. He particularly likes Maika's room because of how much of a hoarder she is. It's a nice way of showing how passionate she is about manga. My favourite room is the club room. Originally, they were going to modify the club room from the light novel because it would have been too much work to add all the chem prep materials in the room every time they drew it. Despite this, they did it. They filled the glass closets, they put a clock, speaker, and poster on the wall. They put a based cactus on the table. Now, you may be saying, so what? Does it really add to the quality of the show? On its own, it doesn't add much. But when every room has this level of detail, it adds up to create a realistic world. Even in a show that I love like Toradora, I've always had a problem with how empty Minori, Taiga, and Ryuji's rooms all are. Maybe it's a simple coincidence that all these characters don't have bells and whistles in their room. And I would be more willing to accept this conclusion if there was more attention to detail in every other room, like Hyouka. Because how often is the environment around us not filled? Usually there's a vacuum cleaner stuffed in the corner, a mop in a random spot, or a tea towel placed under a potted plant. Needless to say, these details take a tremendous effort. A bunch of the time the objects are drawn up from many angles only to never see the light of day. For instance, this button on the school uniform has 11 renders. Araki's computer gets renders from the back. I barely even notice these things when watching the show. So when these objects are used, like the whiskey chocolates, they just bring a whole new dimension of flair. It's attention to detail like this which makes KyoAni deserve their crown as world-building royalty. Then there are the character designs, which keep the show's grounded theme whilst also having defining characteristics. Character designer Futoshi Nishiya specifically gets a lot of mileage out of the characters' hair. I like how Oriki's hair shows that he doesn't care much about his appearance. One of my friends pointed at a picture of Mayuka and said, "Damn, she's got a real big forehead." In response, my other friend said, "Nah, she's just got micro bangs. It's a bold choice, bro." And, having a bold hair choice fits Mayuka perfectly. Short, utilitarian hair. As for Satoshi, I was originally struggling to think of a reason why I liked his design. But then I realized, that's kind of the point. Satoshi is a regular person. He represents the ordinary people. It's not even a cop-out either, because we get to see him in a fucking satin suit, which is probably better than any design I'll ever come up with in my lifetime. My personal favourite is Chitanda, because they were somehow able to make a girl with long black hair stand out. Takemoto explains, she'd definitely been overshadowed if we had taken the cliche route, so I asked Nishiya-kun to give her a more simplified design. I also told him to not make her design look that stereotypical. I had him pay attention to the silhouette of the hair or the size of her eyes. I suppose that's how we somehow were able to step away from the classy lady with long black hair trope and create the character Eri Chitanda. I like how Chitanda is distinguished from Irisu with her wider head and taller eyes and bangs that sweep to the side to reveal her face. These three changes make her head more circular, her eyes bigger, and thus cuter in comparison to the colder Irisu. The head tells us that she isn't hiding anything and can be taken at face value, whereas Irisu's face is obstructed by a strand of hair, in line with her deceitful and masked personality. Most of Hyouka's scenes are made visually engaging through excellent composition, blocking, and editing. In this scene, we get a POV shot, a zoom, and a wide shot of the entire room. This is great because, number one, variety keeps the viewer's attention, and two, because, as I explained before, the rooms are detailed, thus, when we get different angles, it inadvertently showcases the environment they're in. I always think about how, if they change the angle of a shot, even in a simple scene such as the quartet talking in the club room, they have to redraw the background. Not an easy task, with the amount of detail in any given room. KyoAni often creates intimacy with the shots they provide of the characters. When Chitanda's making jelly-filled donuts, this 20-second sequence squeezes in 8 tight shots. Each shot focuses on a different part of her, which provides a more holistic understanding of her space within the scene than 2 or 3 establishing shots ever could. It makes you wonder, with the number of times scenes shot in this way appear in the show, why do they even go through all the trouble? I think most of the time they're communicating something. In the jelly-filled donut clip, Uriki's side-eye in this upward panning shot implies that he's paying attention to her. He's even noticing the sounds of the string of her apron jostling around. It's a hint towards his somewhat crush on Chitanda. And much like the detail in every room, like when these shots keep appearing over and over again, it's indicative of a grander plan that they have to integrate all these small moments to really make something meaningful. Hyouka emphasizes blocking in many of its important scenes. Blocking refers to how characters visually interact with their environment to pack an extra punch. A moment that's always jumped out to me is when Satoshi crosses past this pillar in episode 10 to create a physical barrier between himself and Oriki. Boom. Right there. The personality difference between the two is emphasized. Simple, but effective. Episode 1 has 2 iconic bits of blocking. The first comes when Oriki enters the club room for the first time. As Chitanda is slowly turning, more of the light is hitting her body. It's only after her turning that Oriki starts having the light shine on him, implying that the light is shining from Chitanda. This is, of course, one main pattern of the show. Then there's the hair scene, which visually engulfs everything around Oriki with Chitanda. Blocking and composition are some of, if not my favourite parts of visual mediums because, say, if you're writing a book, how could you communicate something like, in this dialogue between Satoshi and Oriki, Satoshi passes this pillar? You can't. Or how would you explain in a scene that is so quiet and in the moment as Oriki and Chitanda's first encounter, that the light slowly starts shining upon Chitanda and then Oriki? Even in the hair scene where it could feasibly be expressed through words, I would undoubtedly take KyoAni's animation any day. KyoAni adds shot variety with these hyperbolized realities that appear within scenes. They range from simple caricatures to incorporating the characters into the imagined world to entire art style changes. My personal favourite is this sequence. The combination of the sound design, the stop motion like animation that gives it an older feel, and the line work and kanji that envelop the rabbit and little Chitanda make it so effective in communicating Sekatani's pain. I'm glad these sequences are in the show since you don't get to see much of the sort in live action due to budget and set restraints, especially in Slice of Life. With animation, you can draw whatever you think of, and the result? A lot of cool shots. What's even better is that Takemoto encouraged all the animators to contribute to these scenes. He didn't allow for an individual storyboarder. It's why there's as much variety between them as there is. People interpret these situations differently. I'd say the editing, for the most part, helps ensure the scenes don't feel drawn out or static. Usually this is achieved through insert shots of the aforementioned detailed rooms, detailed objects, hyperbolized shots, or even a cheeky transition. KyoAni knows how to use jump cuts, not only for comedic effect like here in episode 19, but also to cut out unnecessary shit like in episode 22. Here, they've cut the end of the first sentence and the start of the last. In other words, what we already knew has been removed and the structure has been preserved. This is a sharp editing technique that I would like to see more. Obviously, the segments where they involve everyday mysteries are entertaining, but it's each character's charm that really pulls you in. Whilst the show is about mysteries, they are merely a vehicle to explore the characters. One effective characterization tool which is used in the show is how each quartet member acts differently when presented with the same situation. For example, when Satoshi asks everyone if they know what the 7 deadly sins are, the studious Chitanda answers immediately, whereas Oriki tends to get these types of questions wrong. This happens again when Satoshi and Chitanda are talking about tarot cards. And then with the student council president. The scene where they're watching the film does a great job of characterizing everyone. You've got the manga enthusiast Maika, who is cinema sinning all over the movie and has the cinema etiquette down pat. Satoshi is eagerly getting into it, and is that one friend who constantly talks during the movie. Chitanda is comically engaged, and Oriki doesn't give a shit. If you've ever been to the movies with new friends for the first time, you know exactly what I mean when I say it's great for characterization. I could identify that Chitanda does things because she wants to, whereas Tomoe uses FOMO to inspire her actions. Tomoe writes to Oriki saying that she won't regret what she has done in 10 years. Later in that episode, Chitanda says, 10 years from now, I might not care about what happened to Sekatani, but the feelings I'm having now, there's something that I don't want to think will mean nothing in the future. After all, it's the present that I'm living in. You can even compare one of the characters to an earlier version of themselves to show growth. When Chitanda invades Oriki's personal space earlier in the show, his reactions are of discomfort. As they get closer to each other, Oriki's reactions change. In the beginning, he starts getting uncomfortable because of his lust, but by episode 19, Oriki has moved past this phase. He's now flustered because of his non-haram romantic feelings. I would also like to show you 2 practically identical scenarios. The difference is that one is from episode 2 and the other is from episode 19. Take a look. Compare Chichanda's face from episode 2 on the left and episode 19 on the right. These two have grown comfortable with each other in the last 15 episodes. Oriki no longer has to force her away, rather, he's the one putting the book down. Scriptwriter Shoji Gato explains how he was close to making the cast more unrestrained. This was out of fear that viewers would find the show too boring. I wrote a lot of dialogue where Eri would be more of a foolish and bothersome girl, while Hotaro was pushed around by her and would immediately retort something along the lines of, "No way, I can't do that." I'm glad they didn't take this approach, since part of what makes this show entertaining is the variation in how the characters express themselves. For instance, in just one episode, Orochi rejects Chitanda's curiosity by first simply turning his head away, then turning his whole body away, then hiding behind his book, then trying to quietly walk away, then starting to raise his voice, then a whole ass cutscene. In some situations, Orochi does react the same every time. For example, when he chalks his success down to luck. Since we know that Kyo Annie didn't take that shitty approach and don't slack when it comes to varying their characters' expressions, there must be a reason why he does this. In this situation, I think he reacts the same way every time because it's outlining one of Orochi's defense mechanisms, that is, not knowing how to respond to praise. Please stick with me. So, epistemology is the field of philosophy concerned with understanding how we arrive at the knowledge we have. An epistemological question that reviewers should be asking ourselves is, how do we understand what a good story is? This is contingent on many factors, such as the country or culture it's being asked in. What are the moral and storytelling differences between my culture and other cultures, and what is valued most? Digging into this epistemological question allows us to understand why stories are told in certain ways. We can then appreciate more stories. I didn't like the final episode of Hyouka when I first watched it. Though I was, admittedly, 12, I thought the ending wasn't fit to be a finale. Heck, the mystery wasn't even the most complex in the show. Shouldn't it have peaked in this episode? I thought the mysteries were the show's key appeal, and this was because my experience up to that point told me that a story's plot was the forefront of what it was trying to say. I, expected a finale to be far more dramatic. Where was the kiss, the confession of love, or, anything that could have added drama? Satoshi and Maika have their final scene without much fanfare. The ED plays like normal, but there is drama. You just need to be looking for it in the right places and understand the style of the storytelling, the simple mystery, Maika and Satoshi's simple last appearance, and the ED emphasize that this is a normal day. We're grounded in reality like the rest of the show. The scale isn't created in the episode itself, it's by seeing Orochi's growth from episodes 1 to 22, seeing the beauty that comes from the rose-colored life, whilst also being reminded that you can be snapped back into reality just as quickly. Episode 22 beautifully blends the delicateness of the everyday with the sublime. I believe that my old thinking, and the thinking of a lot of people, is perfectly summed up by Orochi's mistake in the credits of Fool's arc. I was curious about Hongo-san, the girl. This one sentence explains the appeal of Hyouka. The mysteries are fantastically constructed, but what I'm ultimately interested in are these characters. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between. Failing to expand your understanding of what is good could lead to missing out on Hyouka episode 22. A complaint by YouTuber Rising Sun Reviews on the Anime Nomad podcast was that Chitanda is annoying in the first several episodes, so this resulted in them not caring about her much. To address the first part of this criticism, Chitanda is annoying on purpose, since she represents the rose-colored life. Her constant tugging and proactivity is what is needed to live the rose-colored life, as bothersome and annoying as that may be. Secondly, I understand it's easy to say that she's worth putting up with in hindsight, but consider her character design, the hair scene in her introduction, and the funny little actions like grabbing the bag and bobbing in excitement. Aren't they enough of a reason to entice you? After a quick visit to the negative review section on my anime list, you'll notice the word boring appearing often. I'll pick on the most interacted with one. Feel free to pause and read the entire thing, but I just want to highlight this passage. The mysteries are so boring, I don't think anyone actually cared about them being solved. If you expected suspense of sorts, or being somewhat intrigued, then perish the thought, you won't find any of that here. Once again, I refer to what I said a few minutes ago. Whilst the show is about mysteries, they are merely a vehicle to explore the characters. I hope I've shown that the beautifully crafted, drawn and animated, very nice character designs, theme song and whatnot drive the storytelling. Stay tuned to hear why the themes of the show make the story even more enticing. In terms of complaints I have, what the fuck is this ED, and what the fuck is this bathing suit marketing bullshit? Yeah, I get Oroki has a crush on Chitanda, but there are already enough scenes in the show to handle this. There's also dumb bullshit Takemoto and Gatou said regarding 16-year-old Eri Chitanda's chest, but I'll leave that for another time. Up to now, I've discussed how Hyouka keeps the audience engaged through a great world and proficiently capturing that world. These things, without considering the show's themes, would warrant a solid recommendation from me. I can imagine a timeline where the mysteries and plot take a focus, except this is KyoAni we're talking about here, so the themes don't disappoint. Let's talk about the 3 biggest themes that I've identified and why they take Hyouka to the next level for me. The first theme appears in the Niece of Time arc. While the plot revolves around a significant personal matter for Chitanda, it's ultimately secondary to Oroki's B plotline. We see in the first 4 episodes that Oroki seems indifferent to most things. Rarely does his voice even leave a certain vocal range or his body move more than necessary. His face says it all. So when he's anxiously tapping his leg and speaking with combative language in this scene, these are powerful moments of characterization. Oroki cares about understanding Sekitani-jun, since he empathizes with his ice cream message. Sometimes when I watch you, I start to feel restless, and I want to be relaxed. But even so, I don't enjoy doing anything. His scream is that he dislikes the way he is, but also feels restless when considering the amount of energy Satoshi and Ko expend. And at the end of this exchange, Satoshi asks, "Were you envious of our rose-colored lives?" To which Oroki responds, he himself is unsure of what he's trying to express. That's what we spend the rest of the show exploring, and by the end, Oroki's growth is staggering. In the Niece of Time arc, Oroki is repeatedly contemplating ridding himself of responsibility. 15 episodes later, he's going out of his way to understand someone. In a major moment of self-actualization, he can even express why.
実際はああいうことがあったのに、小木はヘリが好きだったなぁなんて気楽には言えない。それは無神経ってことだ。そりゃさすがに気をつけるさ。わかりにくかったか。無神経というか、あれだ。人の気も知らないでっていう感じだ。多分二度と小木には会わないから、人の気も何もないけどな。
オレキさん。それってとても。うまく言えません。
こいつは何を言おうとしたんだ？まあいっか。うまく言えないことならうまく聞き出せないだろうし。じゃあここで。今日は手伝ってくれて助かった。
どういたしまして。今日はオレキさんの意外な一面が見られてよかったです。
I particularly love this scene because we see 3 angles of ice cream within one exchange. The first angle is why we should do our best to understand others. Oroki explains this. The second angle is that our modes of communication are flawed. Oroki mistakes Chitanda for not following what he had said when she is, in actuality, quite enamored. Even if you think you're able to scream, there's no guarantee that it will be heard correctly. The third angle is that it takes courage to scream. As I mentioned, Chitanda is astounded by Oroki expressing something that she finds very difficult to express. She affirms that listening to people's screams and building courage to scream should be admired. I also love that a flashback scene, which I use sparingly in the show, is used in the final episode. At first I thought it was odd to interject a clip in such a climactic scene, but I think it emphasizes that he really understands Satoshi's scream better now. He could have just said to himself the line, "I wonder if this is the way Satoshi felt back then," but with the visual, there is much more impact. Chitanda's scream is that she is bound to a future set by her family. I originally thought the family dynamic was barely explored in the first half of the show, then reintroduced during the Culture Festival, and then finally in the last episode. After having watched Hyouka a few times, it's clear the seeds are planted throughout the show from the moment that she becomes president of the Classic Lit Club. For example, we see an early sign of her leadership issues in episode 4, when running the meeting at her house. Chitanda prepares food and drinks for everyone and gives a comprehensive debrief on how this seemingly casual meeting between 4 friends will run. In other words, she can get everything that she can plan for perfectly, but when it comes to tasks such as simply choosing who will present first, she's a bit of a klutz. This is a precursor to when her shortcomings as a leader are put on display during the Culture Festival. I get an uncomfortable feeling during the final episode when she's a doll. Let's compare the scene where Chitanda is getting her makeup done to the aforementioned scene when she's making onigiri. In both scenes, Oroki is roughly the same distance away from her. Granted, there is a wall between them here, but Oroki being turned around in this scene, I would say their spatial understanding of one another is more or less the same. As I mentioned before, we get a comprehensive view of Chitanda in the onigiri sequence. Once again, they even go as far as giving us a shot of the strings of her apron, in which the jostling sounds are delicate. In the makeup scene, KyoAni emphasizes the separation between the two. There are no shots of Chitanda. We have to wait half the episode until we can even see her, despite her being the reason why Oroki is here in the first place. Most of the shots in this scene emphasize the wall between them, and the items Chitanda will put on for her doll fit. And when we do finally see her, she looks completely foreign. Remember back to what Takemoto said about Chitanda's design. I had him pay attention to the silhouette of her hair and the size of her eyes. I suppose that's how we were somehow able to step away from the classy lady look with long black hair trope and create the character Eru Chitanda. We have lost the hair that had made Chitanda Chitanda. I also noticed while looking at this Hyouka art book that they drew her eyes flatter. As I mentioned before, of course, Chitanda's eyes are another one of her defining features. In changing the eyes and the hair, they've established that Chitanda has fallen in line with what her family wants. I think the kicker is that Oroki has to ask her if she is listening. It would have been unthinkable for Oroki to ask this question before this episode, considering we have seen Chitanda's determination to listen to, understand, and consider people throughout the show. You feel lost without the Chitanda that you've grown accustomed to in the past 21 episodes. You feel the scream. You feel the grey-coloured life being imprinted onto the person whose curiosity and care blossomed Oroki into a rose-coloured future. On the other hand, this moment is beautiful in that, despite this other side of Chitanda, Oroki is willing to take that step into the unknown. Whether you're an executive committee president, a teacher, a rich daughter, or an ordinary dude, Hyouka reminds us that everyone has these feelings of wanting to scream, knowing that no one may ever be able to understand us. This is why what Oroki says about doing our best to understand other people is something I'm striving to do. The second theme appears in the Jomoji case arc. The theme is talent, explored from the perspectives of Maika and Satoshi. Let's start with the manga side of the arc. The story of A Corpse by Evening depicts the screams of Tanabe, Koichi, and Maika. Tanabe wants his friend to use his talent. Koichi feels like she has no talent, and that has eaten away at her passion for manga. Maika has the passion, but is insecure about her talent. This is Hyouka's mysteries at their peak. Three characters of unrelated backgrounds are interwoven, building layers on one another, and ultimately create a strong emotional payoff. For instance, Koichi's scream hits so hard for the audience and Mayuka because of a seemingly unimportant line that Mayuka said a few episodes earlier. I don't think Koichi's scream would have been nearly as fleshed out if we didn't have the point of reference of Mayuka as well. These characters show that a lot of the time we're at odds with what we want to be good at and what we're actually good at. This leads me to Satoshi's scream, and for this, I want to talk a bit about myself. Hi, I'm Inyaki. I'm a second year philosophy, politics, and economics student. In my spare time, I try to immerse myself in anime, cartoons, movies, books, manga, and music, though I'm really slow at consuming all of those things. I also play video games, specifically Super Smash Bros., which I like to think I've gotten to a decent level at. I try to stay active by playing judo and running. I sporadically take photos. I'm currently learning French for an exchange this year. I've recently gotten into gesture drawing, and I write and edit for this YouTube channel. In other words, I'm kind of Satoshi pilled, and unfortunately, I think it's for the same reason as Satoshi. A major part of my life that I left off of that list is that I'm a big Arsenal fan and played football for the best part of my life. I'm really happy that I can say that I watch my team on TV every week, since I could barely think about the sport 5 years ago. In my first years of playing, I wasn't very good. I'm not a natural athlete. My endurance sucks. I'm pretty short. I don't build muscle naturally or easily, and I'm injury prone. I remember waking up early to train with my dad in the mornings at age 7. I started enjoying the process of improving despite not understanding why I was putting in effort. I remember getting frustrated many times too, like when trying to improve my passing and learning how to put bend on my shots. By 4th grade, I'd gotten much better at the sport, and by 6th grade, I was the best in my primary school. In a lot of ways, this is where my enjoyment of something peaked. I remember eagerly waiting for every lunchtime, ready to run for a football and to the oval. I didn't have to think about what I enjoyed and why. I simply did. I don't know when, but I believe it was around this time that I started having ambitions of wanting to be, exceptional at something, an exceptional footballer if possible. However, in the next 3 years, when I was tested against the big leagues, I realized that I didn't have the talent nor the desire to pursue it. I wasn't even the best in my club team. How could I possibly be the best player in my league? There were younger players better than me. If there were younger players better than me, there's absolutely no way I could be the best in my state. And what about the rest of Australia? Better yet, Australia isn't even an elite footballing nation. Having my dream crushed influenced my relationship with passion back then, and still affects me to this day. I don't think I can truly fall in love with anything again. Whenever I get into a new hobby, I always have this subconscious feeling that I must become exceptional at it. It sucks the fun out of a lot of things. Recently, I've felt this with judo. I'm past the point of being a complete beginner, but I still suck ass. It's frustrating because maybe the reason I'm not having much fun is because I'm not good. I'm at a crossroads where I'm asking myself, should I put in the effort to get good and risk wasting a bunch of time, or should I just give up? Another side effect has been my experience with friendly competition. I turn my friends away from things that we would enjoy competing in because sometimes I would just get into it. I want to be a better person and make my life better by not getting salty, but at the same time, it's the stakes and the flow state that makes it frustrating to lose. Is being less childish a worthwhile trade-off? In the past few years, I've taken that approach, and now me and my friends don't really compete in anything. At the same time, I also feel guilty for not putting much emotion into what we now compete in. Having the ambition to be exceptional whilst not having the talent nor the drive is mine and Satoshi's scream. But, you know, this YouTube channel is a beacon of hope. Although I'm not the most knowledgeable or passionate in any medium, the best writer or the best editor, I feel connected to a goal that isn't about one-upping my peers, but is based on trying my best to create something because I can and want to, and I hope that my unique voice and experience of the world make these videos worth something. The struggle with the rose-colored life is the biggest thematic clash of the show, and resulted in the most self-reflection on myself. The rose-colored life is the potential joy that exists within life's absurdity. It's the joy you feel when you're part of a team that does something great. The joy you feel when you're doing something for the mere sake of doing that thing. The joy you feel with your family at Christmas. But what happens when the team you're with doesn't accept you? Or when the thing you find fun becomes a source of pain? Or when your family restrains you from becoming who you could become? As cringe and cliche of a topic it is, I've been trying to figure out what things are intrinsically valuable to my life as an atheist. However, the more I think about it, I see myself relating to Orochi's cynical view on the rose-colored life. Is the rose-colored life worth it when it comes with so much suffering? There's pressure to live and how to live the rose-colored life. If I buy the new iPhone, find a beautiful partner, or get a high-paying job, then I'll finally be happy. Satoshi is the most relatable character in this regard. He's taking on so many different activities and interests. He can't even stick to the same pouch between episodes. Like many people, his solution to minimizing suffering is not fully committing to anything and patching it up with a new thing. He's constantly trying to get away from this sinking feeling. I currently believe that the things of intrinsic value are constructed by the individual. The issue is, do we know if there are holes in what we construct? If I decide something is the ultimate goal, what happens if somebody comes along and points out an error in my thinking? How do we know that our constructed meanings won't eventually end up haunting us? I've seen this in people from high school who decided the type of person that they are and that they have everything figured out. Do you ever have doubts about yourself? Not really. I'm just going ahead. Most importantly, what's an enticing reason why I shouldn't just accept the boring grey-coloured life? After all, it is more stable and other people are willing to pick up the slack. Or why don't I try to minimize the amount of suffering I have to go through, and if I don't have to do something, I won't. But if I have to, I'll do it quickly. An issue I have with this is that I think personal philosophy should be grounded in science. Kelly McGonigal in The Upside of Stress posits that humans are biologically made to handle stress, and that we need it for a meaningful life. This isn't just the intuitions of philosophers. To bring it back to the absurdity of the human condition, I'm ready to join the rose-colored rebellion. The father of absurdist philosophy, Albert Camus, asks us to rebel against the completely ridiculous situation we're in. I happen to be born in this era, in this wealthy country, to a family who gave me this opportunity to learn philosophy in this universe, on this planet. It's absurd to think about how many things have had to happen to be where I am right now. In my humble opinion, I think it's a really enticing reason to live a rose-colored life. I mean, should I kill myself or convert to a religion to escape this inconceivable situation that I'm in? Nah. I want to take it head on. Through personal experience, I know that being depressed is much worse than being slightly overworked. I'm in the privileged position to have enough glimpses of the rose-colored life to want to chase it. Besides, if we had everything figured out, wouldn't that be depressing in its own way? And like Hotaro, I'm young, so I still have a lot of time to figure this out. That's what I'm currently contending with. I'm sorry if I went a bit too much into philosophy, but I hope, because, you know, it can sound very bro sciencey and really like, you know, I'm 20 years old, second year uni, what the fuck are you saying? But I hope what I've said is intelligible. I'll probably come back to this in like even a few months and be like, what was I thinking? But anyway, it's amazing how this story has helped me express things that I find very hard to put into words. I thank every writer, animator, director, voice actor, and staff member who made this masterpiece possible. I pay further respects to the victims of the KyoAni arson disaster. Those known to have worked on Hyouka include in-between animators Sana Suzuki, Atsushi Miyaji, Saika Watanabe, Chichaze Murayama, Sachi Suda, and Atsushi Ishida. These skillful people ensured that every single frame of Hyouka was up to KyoAni's world-class standards. Thank you for making one of my favorite pieces of art. Key animators Nami Iwasaki and Junichi Uda. Key animator and animation director Hiroyuki Takahashi. Episode director, storyboarder, and key animator Kigami Yoshiji. Thank you for creating countless memorable and moving moments in this series. From the first encounter to the walk home through the cherry blossoms, you have made an extraordinary experience that will be enjoyed and celebrated across generations. Background artists Mikiko Watanabe and production manager Keisuke Yokota. As I've already mentioned, the backgrounds in Hyouka are wonderful. Thank you Mikiko and thank you Keisuke for making Hyouka possible. Chief animation director and character designer Futoshi Nishiya. From all the anime I've watched, no character designer gets close to Futoshi Nishiya for me. His designs for Liz and the Bluebird, Nichijou, and Hyouka are a beacon of inspiration for my own art, and I'm devastated that we won't get to experience any more of his brilliance. Thank you, Futoshi Nishiya. Finally, director Yasuhiro Takemoto. While putting together this script, I noticed a prominent visual motif that Takemoto put in both Hyouka and The Disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya. The motif is reflections. I went into this review with the sole intention of expressing everything I liked about this show, but what ended up happening was me taking a big step back from everything I've valued in my rose-colored life, an acceptance of my past, and a new perspective on empathy. Thank you, Takemoto, for helping me put a bit of myself out there in this video. To leave you with his words, turn your focus to yourself and dig inside. When you make something, you show the audience part of yourself, so you have to sharpen who you are as well. Once you understand who you are, you may understand how to make something. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for watching.